Kid Cudi INSANO album review. Let's chat about it. Hey friends, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning here tonight to chat about this latest album from Kid Cudi. You know him. You probably have some very strong feelings on him either way. And over the years, God, my thoughts on Cudi and his music has really just been all over the place. I mean, in his early days with Man on the Moon 1 and 2, I thought that Cudi had something that a lot of other MCs at the time didn't. I mean, these two albums, who have aged wonderfully, and I think these days are more influential than most want to really admit, were really interesting at the time. They were spacey, a little psychedelic, but also really introspective and vulnerable. And at the time, it wasn't really, something you heard too often in hip-hop. I looked at Cudi as a real fresh face. But over time, I feel like more fans and critics started pushing back a little. And, Cudi did something pretty ballsy, and that was just go further deep down the rabbit hole with albums like Indicud and The Wizard Project that he dropped. Also Satellite Flight, which all of these projects certainly have, one or two really great tracks. But as Cudi's discography went on, I just felt more and more like he's the kind of MC that really needs a producer in the studio with him saying, no, don't do that. And that really culminated with his rock album. Yeah, Speeding Bullet to Heaven. Let me tell you, this thing is not good. As a matter of fact, it's one of the worst things that I've ever heard of in my entire life. And we're living in a time where more and more rock and alternative rock influence is being held in hip-hop. But then we get this thing and it's like, it sucks, man. It's not good. But since then, I will say this. While they are baby steps, I do feel like ever since, Kid Cudi has taken some steps in the right direction. I thought Passion, Pain, and Demon Slaying, while bloated and really, really long, I thought that overall had some really great singles that really impressed me. And also, on top of that, Cudi just seemed like in a really good mindset, and that's all I could have really asked from him at the time. I thought Man on the Moon 3 was actually really decent. I gave it a strong 7, and I've stuck by it. I think it's really solid. Even that Intergalactic soundtrack that he dropped last year, well, not necessarily mandatory listening, I thought it had some really sweet tracks on there. Now, I never know what to expect with a Kid Cudi album, and this new one, I've been scared of it, to be honest. I knew that it was coming down the calendar, and hearing the singles here, one which is literally the best track here, and the other which is literally the worst track here, I did not know what to expect, and let me tell you, we're not out of the woods with old Scott Muscudi yet. This album starts off with Often I Have These Dreams, featuring DJ Drama, the legend DJ Drama, and no trolling. I think this is a really great intro. I love DJ Drama's ad-libs at the beginning of this track. It does a great job of amping me up, and you know what? This track goes pretty hard, honestly. It's rough around the edges. It's a little nasty. That beat is... And Cudi, while remaining his usual laid-back sort of stone self, actually sounds pretty hyped for this track as well. It's dreamy, it's hazy, it's really surreal as well, and honestly, I think it's a fresh sound for Cudi and a great intro when he's focused. And Cudi does get focused. There are some really great moments on here. Keep Bouncin', once again, did not think I was going to enjoy this track, and it did take some time to kind of warm up to me, but once again, it's nasty. It's a little rough around the edges. And spoiler alert, I've never been a big Honorable C Note fan as far as beats go, but this thing is scuzzy, it's noisy, and Cudi sounds like a freaking weirdo in the best way. Yeah, his charisma on this track is actually awesome, and I'm glad that it is, because the songwriting on this track is not up to snuff. The chorus is kind of asinine, but Cudi on these verses sounds hyped. This is a weird one, but it does really work, even though if it is kind of like sensory overload at times. Most Ain't Dennis, honestly, one of my favorite tracks here. This beat is straight up freakish and noisy. As a track, as a whole, I'm surprised by just how wild this is. This is one of the most off-the-walls tracks here. Bring in a really freaking out there production and a really memorable hook, you got a great track. Also, Cudi's definitely at his most charismatic. ElectroWaveBaby also did not expect to hear a track like this on here, but I actually think it comes off really well. Now, there's a lot of pop rap influence on this album. This is a very glossy, very sweet on the ears, and catchy album from Cudi. It's very modern. But the thing is, when Cudi locks in, I actually think he's got a really strong sense of pop sensibility, and it comes through here. The sweet synths and the warm rhythms actually had me up and grooving. Yeah, this track is just nothing but ear candy, and yes, his singing is certainly not up to par, and it gets a little spotty in parts. But it really does work here, and it's insanely memorable. Cud Life is really great, too. Once again, this track is nasty, and that's not something I expected to hear. This beat is just so nasty, it's in your face. Ugh. I mean, Cudi is definitely out of his element on this track. I'm not saying that he's not, but he rises to the occasion in a respectable way. And the vocal effects on the chorus, which is not something that I'm overly amped to hear, I think it makes things pop pretty hard. It's a great track. Also, Too Damn High, featuring Lil Yachty. This track could have gone a lot of ways, but I actually love the thing. And listen, this is the sort of intoxicating, laid-back, overly sugarly pop rap track that I usually head from the hills from, but these two actually have a lot of charisma together. And that hook is just, I cannot say no to it. I'm sorry, I just really can't. And, you know, I will say this. One reservation, Yachty's verse, it's not his most inspired, but as a whole, it really does work. So far, you know, Cudi, you know, when on, can really put out some good material. He's not always on, though. Like, take, for example, Get Off Me, featuring Travis Scott. Yuck. What went on this track? I mean, this was one of the most exciting tracks for me from a distance. I mean, I love Cudi, and I love me some Travis. They do not blend on this track at all. It's really bloated and full of itself, and this lo-fi weirdo beat just does not really live up to the rest of the beats and production on this album. And like, if Cudi and Travis at least brought their A-game verse-wise, I'd be able to look at this track for that, but their sleepy verses add nothing. And this track feels so much longer than it is. It is a mess. As with a lot of other Cudi albums, the good material is here, but the slope is so slippery. It is so slippery. I mean, take, for example, Wow, featuring A$AP Rocky. I mean, we get tracks on here that are electric and a real breath of fresh air for Cudi. Then you get this, and it's just so bloated. For the new me sound that DJ Drama introduces on this track, this is kind of piss poor. I mean, like I said, the writing and the singing on this album, it's not always perfect, but when Cudi locks in and gets that charisma going, he can sell me on something. He can't do anything here. It's so thrown together. It's so half-assed. And at 4 minutes and 30 seconds, this is the longest cut here. By the way, A$AP Rocky, who I will always love seeing in a track list, does nothing. More bad decisions. A Tale of a Night is not much better. I mean, Jesus, this is one of the worst tracks here. This beat is pathetic, and the production, my God, like, I've seen more attractive things on my hairline. Cudi sounds lost, and the hook, if you even want to call it that, is really, really not up to snuff. It's a sloppy, pathetic, sad mess, and just one of the worst tracks here. But Cudi still does have a lot of tricks up his sleeve, believe it or not, like Getcha Gone. This is easily the shortest track here, but it's a blast of aggressive and fun energy. I have never heard Cudi this fired up. Maybe not ever, and that's saying something, but he just sounds inspired and just riled up on this track. Aggressive, too. And the urgency continues with this unnerving, very tense beat. It's really good, though. Mr. Coola is one of the iciest and coldest and most sinister sounding tracks here, and Cudi really does raise the bar as far as his performance goes. Cudi's performance on this track is uncharacteristically dark, seriously dangerous as well. It's a side we don't get to see from Cudi often, but he is so laser focused here, and I'm so happy to hear it. Tortured is a serious throwback from Cudi, at least the sound of it, like the instrumental palette, but it's done so well that this is almost a breath of fresh air. It's very whimsical and nocturnal. It sounds like something that would have done nicely on the first two Man on the Moon projects. It's one of the more low-key and sort of laid-back and introspective tracks here, but that's Cudi's home base. It's a hazy, spacey jam that locks in on a groove and honestly becomes really hypnotizing by the end of it. Also, X and Cut, featuring the late XXXTentacion. I had very, very low standards for this track going into it, but they really blew it out of the water, and I think it may be the best track here. I mean, I should preface this by saying I was never the biggest X fan. Sorry, I mean, I have grown, I have kind of warmed up to his material in the last few years, but his vocals on this track are so hurt and pained and sorrowful, and Cudi honestly really brings his A game. In a lot of ways, this track is the perfect one for him. Had a lot of reservations on 7 featuring Lil Wayne as well. This is seriously, once again, modernized Cudi sound that I actually really love. I mean, it's once again got that angry, fired up beat. The use of auto-tune, there's a lot of it, and honestly, I'm not that big of a fan of this much of it, but actually it works here. And Lil Wayne, if you've been a fan of this channel for the last few years, you'll know I've never been that big of a Wayne guy, but I do really love his verse here. And believe it or not, Porsche Topless, I think it's the best track here. It is so carefree, it is so feel-good and colorful, and Cudi's vocals on this track actually some of my favorite that he's ever done. As a matter of fact, as far as a single goes, I can't remember the last time that I loved a Cudi track this much. And if it's a little bit too airy, a little bit too stoned for you, I get it. But I put this on and I can't not be in a truly great mood. I mean, yeah, I know it's January, but in December, do not be shocked to see this on my singles countdown and pretty high. Oh God, but how? How has he got even more inconsistent over the years? At the Party, featuring Travis Scott and Pharrell Williams. Oh, what is this? This beat and this production, I've sincerely had bowel movements that sound nicer than this track. This beat, the production, it is laughable, and nobody brings their A game. Pharrell on this hook mumbles his way through it. This track is just such, trying to be this laid-back, stoned party aesthetic, which I like. I mean, it's why I love albums like Travis Scott's Rodeo. But there is nothing to fall back on. It is asinine, and I think it's the worst track here. A lot of tracks like Freshie as well. It's abrasive, it's noisy, it's clunky once again. It's abrasive and noisy and kind of clunky production and beat-wise once again, which is fine. But Cudi all of a sudden sounds completely out of place, lost. Even his delivery is so much more annoying here. Like, what happened to that confidence? And later on in the track, I actually love how warped and genuinely experimental and psychedelic this beat gets. I just wish that Cudi himself brought a little bit more oomph. Funky Wizard Smoke, like by this point in the album, I'm running out of steam and this track's not helping. This beat is not bad per se, but everything else about this track just really falls flat on its face. The sample, the hook. It's so clumsy. It gets borderline goofy at times. Like, we're better than this. Come on. Ranger Boys featuring Young Thug I actually thought had some potential. I love the strummed riff and just how gritty and nocturnal this track comes off. And I mean, I've never been that big of a Thug fan, though. And just this verse, he's barely even heard. He barely does anything. And Cudi on this track, he actually doesn't sound that bad. I mean, lyrically, he's kind of running on empty, but there's enough to like on this track. But after 18 tracks of this, I just need a little bit more, and I'm not getting it right now. Blue Sky is just so middle of the road. Now, I actually really love the beat and the production on this track. Just this heavy use of synths, the airy atmosphere, just how nocturnal it is. I love that. As a matter of fact, the whole sunnier, more colorful vibes of this track, I'm all for. It's Cudi who just does not bring his A game. His vocals need to be picked up all of a sudden, and the songwriting's getting even more flimsy. And Hit the Streets in My Nikes, honestly, as a finale, I have a lot of the same feelings. I love the energy and the urgency behind the beat and the production here. That's all gravy, but Kid Cudi has hit a wall here. He has run out of things to say and has just gotten on my last nerve. And here we are, another Kid Cudi album with a great amount of really decent material. But once again, somebody needs to tell him no. Somebody needs to tell him don't do that. Somebody needs to tell him, hey, look, 6 of these tracks, man, don't need to be here. because the irony here is the good material here is like a rebirth for Cudi, and it is just sounding so good and passionate and fired up and hungry. And when's the last time we've heard any of that from him? It's been quite some time. I just wish this thing wasn't so bloated, and when the slippery slope comes into action, it is so bad so quick. I don't know, man. It's a Cudi album. What did you expect? In 2024, what did you expect? I'm feeling a strong 5 on this album, but let me know what you all think down below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, friends.